The Mall of Illusion had always promised progress. It had taught the inhabitants that as long as they moved forward, as long as they climbed, achieved, and adapted, they would rise. But now, something was happening. Something the teacher had never foreseen. The weight of the standards was growing too heavy. And those who could not carry them collapsed beneath them. The teacher stood at the great pavilion, his eyes locked on a figure who had been at the center of it all. The young inhabitant, the one who had been denied his ascension, the one who had followed every rule, every lesson, lay motionless at the base of the escalators. The shoppers gathered around, murmuring, whispering, but none stepped forward to help. For in their eyes he had not been taken. He had simply failed. He was not strong enough, they said. The burden of progress was too great for him. This is the way of the mall. And just like that, he was gone. No ceremony, no grief, no moment of silence. Only an empty space where he had once stood. And the teacher, who had shaped their world, who had promised them ascension, could say nothing. Because the truth was sinking into his mind deeper than it ever had before. This was not progress, this was decay. At first the deaths were rare. Only those who could not keep up fell. But soon, the burden of individual standards spread, and the mall itself began to devour its own. The loudest voices, those who had once set the rules, began to collapse beneath the weight of maintaining their own image. The richest, those who had measured success by possessions, were crushed by the need to acquire more, to never let go. The most powerful, those who had built their status through control, began to turn on each other, consumed by the fear that they were no longer enough. And one by one, they fell. And no one stopped to mourn them. Because the mall did not slow for the fallen. The escalators kept moving, the shoppers kept climbing, the cycle continued. And as long as you were not the one who fell, nothing was wrong. The teacher could not ignore it anymore. What had once been a system of order had become a machine of exhaustion, cruelty, and death. And so, for the first time, he spoke against the system he had created. At the great pavilion, he stood before the crowd. He raised his voice, not as the one who built the mall, not as the one who had taught them the way, but as one who had seen what they refused to acknowledge. This is not how it was meant to be. The crowd stirred. Some turned to listen, others kept moving. But the teacher continued. You were meant to rise, but not at the cost of your lives. You were meant to grow, but not by sacrificing those who cannot keep up. The system was created to help you, but now it is consuming you. And for the first time, the crowd pushed back. The weak are not meant to rise. We have only made things better. You do not understand, teacher. You are holding us back. And with that, the last illusion shattered. He had believed that the system had been corrupted. But now he saw the truth. The system had become what they wanted it to be. And now, they no longer needed him. The teacher stood alone in the pavilion, the words of the inhabitants ringing in his mind. And as the last voices faded, his gaze fell on a door he had never seen before. It was not grand. It was not marked. It was not hidden. It had simply never mattered. Because until now he had never thought to look for it. His breath caught in his throat. The mall was not sealed. The mall had never been sealed. The door had been there all along, but no one had wanted to leave. His body tensed. For the first time, a question rose in his mind, one that terrified him. What if I walk through? But before he could take a step, he heard a sound that froze him in place. The sound of another body hitting the ground. Another inhabitant had fallen. Another sacrifice to the weight of the system. Another death, unnoticed, unmourned. And the teacher realized something far worse than his own fear. If he stayed, if he continued to teach, if he ignored the truth, he would become part of the illusion again. And so, he made his choice. He turned away from the shoppers, turned away from the system, turned away from the rules. And for the first time since the mall was built, the teacher walked toward the exit.